4 ordinary quarters, 4 decades of American history. Hidden inside each one, secrets that could turn 25 cents into thousands, even tens of thousands of dollars. From rare mint errors to doubled dies that went unnoticed for decades, these coins are still sitting in pocket change right now. Today, we break down 4 Washington quarters most people walk right past and show you exactly what to look for. First coin. United States 1985 Washington quarter $P mint mark. Struck at the Philadelphia Mint during a year when over 500 million quarters rolled off the production lines and into the pockets, registers, and parking meters of everyday America, represents one of the most quietly deceptive coins in the entire Washington quarter series. Because while the vast majority of these pieces are worth exactly 25 cents and nothing more, a vanishingly small fraction of them carry secrets so subtle that even seasoned collectors have walked right past them in pocket change for decades without ever realizing the fortune sitting quietly in the palm of their hand. The Philadelphia Mint in 1985 was operating at full industrial capacity, churning out coinage at a pace that left little room for the kind of meticulous quality control that earlier, slower eras had enjoyed. And it is precisely this breakneck production environment that opened the door for a handful of extraordinary anomalies to slip through the inspection process and enter circulation completely unnoticed, where they would remain hidden in plain sight for years, sometimes decades, waiting for the right pair of trained eyes to finally recognize what had been there all along. The obverse of the 1985 P quarter features John Flanagan's enduring portrait of George Washington, his stoic profile facing left with the word liberty arching above and in God we trust nestled beneath the chin, while the reverse displays the heraldic eagle clutching its arrows and olive branch above the denomination. And on most examples the surfaces carry a bright, almost commercial luster that speaks to the mass production nature of the strike. But on certain surviving specimens, the fields reveal a depth of frost and a sharpness of detail that immediately separates them from the millions of ordinary strikes surrounding them in any random sample. The historical context of 1985 adds a layer of cultural texture to this coin that many collectors overlook, because this was a year defined by a surging American economy, a booming stock market, and a renewed national confidence that seemed to ripple through every aspect of daily life, including the coins jingling in people's pockets. And yet, despite the optimistic spirit of the era, the Philadelphia Mint was quietly battling the same technical challenges that had plagued coin production for years, including die deterioration, inconsistent striking pressure, and the gradual wearing of master dies that had been reused far beyond their intended lifespan, all of which contributed to a small but meaningful population of 1985 P quarters that display characteristics far outside the normal production tolerances, and that have since become the focus of intense collector interest. Among the most sought-after variations are those exhibiting noticeable doubling on the lettering, particularly on Liberty or in God we trust, where the faint ghost of a secondary image can be seen offset from the primary impression, a telltale sign that the die was hubbed more than once with a slight misalignment between hubbings. And while this type of doubling is sometimes dismissed as mechanical doubling or strike doubling by inexperienced observers, true doubled die varieties on the 1985 P quarter are extraordinarily rare and have been documented by specialists with a level of precision that leaves no doubt about their authenticity and significance. The weight of a standard 1985 P quarter should be approximately 5.67 grams, with a composition of 91.67% copper and 8.33% nickel clad over a pure copper core, giving the coin its characteristic silvery appearance with a faint warm undertone when viewed at certain angles. But collectors are advised to weigh any suspicious example on a precision digital scale calibrated to at least the 100th of a gram, because deviations from the standard weight can indicate an off-metal error, a wrong planchet strike, or even a transitional error where the coin was struck on a planchet intended for an entirely different denomination. And these anomalies, when authenticated, can transform an otherwise ordinary quarter into one of the most valuable discoveries in modern American numismatics. The visual appearance of a truly exceptional 1985 P quarter is something that stays with you once you have seen it, because there is a quality to the luster, a tightness to the strike, and a preservation of surface detail that simply does not exist on the millions of circulated examples that have passed through countless hands, registers, and coin-counting machines over the past 4 decades. And when a collector encounters a specimen that has somehow survived in condition approaching perfection, the effect is almost magnetic, drawing the eye back again and again to study the razor-sharp feathering on the eagle's wing, the crisp individual strands of Washington's hair, and the unbroken fields that reflect light with an almost liquid quality that speaks to a strike delivered by fresh dies under optimal pressure. The rim of the coin is another critical area of examination, because a well-struck 1985 P quarter should display a fully formed, even rim with no evidence of clipping, splitting, or irregularity. And yet a small number of known examples exhibit what specialists refer to as a folded rim or railroad rim error, where the collar die that is supposed to hold the planchet in place during striking malfunctioned in some way, causing the metal to flow upward and over the rim edge in a manner that creates a distinctive and highly collectible visual anomaly. And these pieces, when they surface, tend to generate immediate excitement among error collectors who understand just how rarely this specific type of production failure occurred at the Philadelphia Mint during this period. The strike alignment, too, is worth scrutinizing carefully, because while most 1985 P quarters were struck with the obverse and reverse aligned in the standard coin turn orientation, where the reverse appears upside down when the obverse is held upright and rotated, a handful of documented examples show evidence of rotational misalignment or even partial collar errors that left portions of the design unstruck or off-center. And these striking anomalies, while subtle to the untrained eye, are immediately recognizable to anyone who has spent time studying the series, and can add a dimension of desirability that transcends mere grade or condition. The emotional journey of discovering a rare 1985 P quarter is something that resonates deeply with collectors because it taps into a universal human fantasy, the idea that extraordinary value can be hiding inside something utterly ordinary, that a coin worth 25 cents could actually be worth enough to serve as a down payment on a home, that a single moment of careful observation could transform a handful of pocket change into an unexpected financial windfall that changes the trajectory of a family's financial future. And while the odds of such a discovery are undeniably long, they are not zero, and that slender thread of possibility is what keeps collectors searching, studying, and hopping, year after year, coin after coin. There is also a particular emotional weight that comes from the fact that the 1985 P quarter was minted during a time when coin collecting as a hobby was experiencing something of a lull in public enthusiasm, meaning that far fewer people were actively searching their change for varieties and errors during this period. And so, the surviving population of exceptional specimens may be even smaller than production numbers alone would suggest. Because many potentially significant coins were spent, lost, damaged, or destroyed during decades when nobody was looking for them. And this invisible attrition adds a layer of poignancy to every genuine discovery, because each one represents a small miracle of survival against the relentless forces of circulation, commerce, and time. The collector appeal of the 1985 P quarter is further amplified by its accessibility, because unlike ultra-rare 19th century issues that trade only among wealthy specialists, this is a coin that anyone can theoretically find, anyone can afford to search for, and anyone can learn to authenticate with patience and study, and that democratic quality gives the pursuit a feeling of shared adventure that more exclusive areas of numismatics simply cannot replicate. When the conversation shifts toward value, the landscape becomes both thrilling and sobering, because documented collector and auction results for exceptional 1985 P Washington quarters have shown a remarkable upward progression that few would have predicted when these coins were first released into circulation. And while the overwhelming majority of examples remain worth only their face value, the small population of coins that display significant varieties, errors, or extraordinary preservation have established a documented market presence that cannot be ignored, with minor variations and modestly notable examples having recorded collector and auction outcomes in the range of $2,500 to $3,500, a figure that already represents a return more than 10,000 times the coin's original denomination, and that would have been considered absurd by anyone not deeply familiar with the specialized market for modern era coinage. Moving up the value ladder, high-grade examples that have been certified by major grading services at the very top of the numerical scale have achieved documented results approaching $5,000, particularly when the coin displays full strike characteristics, unbroken mint luster, and surfaces that show no evidence of the contact marks, hairlines, or environmental damage that typically accumulate on coins that have spent any time in circulation. And these pristine survivors are so rare that their appearance at auction often triggers spirited bidding among specialists who understand that opportunities to acquire them may come only once every several years. Unusual mint anomalies, including genuine double-die varieties and significant off-center or broad-strike errors, have recorded documented results in the neighborhood of $6,000. And these prices reflect not only the raw rarity of the coins themselves, but also the intense competition among a growing community of error collectors who have come to appreciate the 1985 P quarter as one of the more fertile hunting grounds for significant production anomalies within the modern Washington quarter series. The value progression continues upward with desirable collector pieces that combine exceptional grade with a documented variety or error, and these coins have achieved documented auction outcomes around $7,500, a threshold that places them firmly in the category of significant numismatic investments, and that underscores the degree to which the market for modern error and variety coinage has matured and deepened over the past 2 decades. Driven by improved diagnostic tools, more comprehensive attribution guides, and a generation of collectors who grew up with the internet and who have access to information and community resources that earlier collectors could only dream of. Exceptionally preserved or uncommon examples, particularly those that combine multiple desirable attributes such as a certified high grade alongside a recognized variety designation, have reached documented results of approximately $8,000. And at this level, the coins begin to attract attention not only from traditional error and variety specialists, but also from type collectors and registry set participants who are seeking the finest known examples of the date and mint mark combination, regardless of variety status, broadening the pool of potential buyers and adding competitive pressure that can drive prices beyond what a narrow specialist market alone would support. Unusual finds with strong collector demand, including coins that display previously undocumented errors or that represent newly recognized varieties emerging from ongoing research and discovery, have recorded documented outcomes around $8,500, and these prices often reflect the excitement and urgency that accompanies a genuinely new discovery. Because collectors understand that being among the first to acquire a newly recognized variety carries both prestige and the potential for long-term appreciation as the market for that specific variety develops and matures over time. At the very pinnacle of the market, extraordinary or historically significant examples of the 1985 P quarter have achieved documented collector and auction results approaching $9,000, a figure that represents the absolute ceiling of what this specific date and mint mark has demonstrated in the current market, and that typically involves coins with a combination of extreme rarity, exceptional preservation, significant variety or error status, and documented provenance that traces the coin's history through respected collections and major auction appearances. And while these results are genuinely documented and represent real transactions between willing buyers and sellers, they are never guaranteed, and collectors are strongly urged to seek professional authentication and grading from recognized services before any purchase or sale. Because the difference between a genuinely rare and valuable example and a common piece with superficially similar characteristics can be measured in thousands of dollars and can only be reliably determined through expert examination. As you hold a 1985p Washington quarter in your hand and turn it slowly under good light, studying the weight for that telltale deviation, examining the metal composition for any unexpected color or toning, checking the strike alignment for any rotational irregularity, running your fingertip along the rim for signs of folding or splitting, and scrutinizing every letter under magnification for the faintest ghost of doubling. You are participating in a ritual that connects you to every collector who has ever searched through pocket change with a quiet, persistent hope, and you are also engaging in an act of preservation, because every coin that is pulled from circulation and studied, authenticated, and protected is one more piece of American numismatic history that survives for future generations to learn from and appreciate. And whether your 1985p quarter turns out to be worth 25 cents or $2,500 or something far beyond, the act of looking closely, of truly seeing what is in front of you, is itself the reward that makes this pursuit endlessly compelling. And with that thought lingering in the air, consider that the next coin we examine may be even more extraordinary, even more elusive, and even more capable of rewriting everything you thought you knew about what ordinary pocket change can hide. Second coin, 1967, United States Washington quarter, a coin that to the untrained eye looks like every other piece of pocket change that has jingled through American registers for decades, carries beneath its familiar silver-toned surface a story so unlikely, so layered with historical accident and numismatic intrigue, that even longtime collectors have been known to pause when the full picture is laid out before them, because 1967 was not a normal year for American coinage. It was a year caught in the turbulent transition between the silver era and the clad era, a year when the United States Mint was under extraordinary pressure to produce enormous quantities of coinage while simultaneously navigating a coin shortage crisis that had begun gripping the nation. And the quarters struck during this period carry the fingerprints of that chaos in ways that most people will never notice unless they know exactly what to look for. The Philadelphia Mint bore the primary production burden for 1967 quarters, since mint marks were temporarily suspended on all denominations from 1965 through 1967 as part of a broader effort to discourage hoarding, meaning that every 1967 quarter, regardless of which facility produced it, carries no mint mark at all. And this seemingly minor detail creates a situation where collectors cannot simply look at a mark to determine origin. They must instead study the coin itself, its strike quality, its luster patterns, and its subtle die characteristics to form any judgment about where and under what conditions it was produced. And it is within this ambiguity that some of the most fascinating and valuable discoveries in the Washington Quarter series reside. The backdrop of 1967 was one of national unease and transformation, with the Vietnam War escalating, social movements reshaping the cultural landscape, and the American economy straining under pressures that directly affected the coinage system, because rising silver prices had triggered massive public hoarding of silver coins, prompting Congress to pass the Coinage Act of 1965, which authorized the removal of silver from dimes and quarters beginning in 1965. But the transition was not instantaneous, And during the 1965 to 1967 period, the mint continued striking quarters in a reduced silver composition of 40% silver clad over a pure copper core, a transitional alloy that would only last 3 years before being replaced entirely by the copper-nickel clad composition in 1968, making the 1967 quarter one of the last silver-bearing quarters in American history, and placing it at the very edge of a numismatic cliff, the final breath of an era that stretched back to the founding of the Republic. This transitional silver composition gives the 1967 quarter a visual warmth that distinguishes it from later clad issues, because the 40% silver alloy produces a subtly different color profile, a slightly creamier, less harshly reflective tone that experienced collectors can often identify by eye alone, and when combined with the coin's weight of approximately 5.67 grams, this metallic signature becomes one of the first diagnostic checkpoints for anyone hopping to determine whether their 1967 quarter is a common circulation piece or something far more significant, because any deviation from the expected weight or color could signal an error of extraordinary proportions. The visual characteristics of the 1967 Washington quarter follow John Flanagan's long-standing design, with Washington's left-facing profile on the obverse framed by Liberty above and In God We Trust below, while the reverse features the perched eagle with spread wings clutching arrows and an olive branch. But what sets exceptional 1967 quarters apart from the millions of ordinary strikes is the quality of the strike itself. Because during this period, the mint was pushing production equipment to its absolute limits, running presses around the clock with minimal maintenance intervals, and this relentless pace meant that dies were often used far beyond their optimal lifespan, leading to a wide spectrum of strike quality ranging from weakly impressed, mushy details on late die-state coins to blazingly sharp, fully detailed strikes produced when dies were fresh and properly aligned, and it is the latter category. The coin struck early in a die's life under ideal conditions that forms the foundation of the high-end collector market for this date. Among the known errors and varieties associated with the 1967 quarter, perhaps the most compelling are the instances of double die obverse, where careful examination under magnification reveals a secondary, offset image on elements such as the lettering of In God We Trust or the numerals of the date, caused by the die being hubbed multiple times with a slight misalignment between hubbings. And while casual observers might dismiss these as mere doubling from wear or mechanical issues, genuine double die varieties on the 1967 quarter are extraordinarily scarce, with only a handful of distinct attributions recognized by the specialist community, and each one carries a backstory of production line chaos, of a die that was pulled, rehubbed, and returned to service without anyone catching the misalignment until long after the coins had entered circulation and scattered across the country. The emotional dimension of collecting the 1967 quarter is inseparable from the theme of missed opportunities, because this is a coin that millions of Americans handled daily without a second thought, a coin that was spent on gasoline and groceries and cigarettes, that dropped into payphones and vending machines, that was lost between couch cushions and tossed into jars and forgotten, and somewhere within that vast ocean of circulation, a small number of genuinely rare and valuable examples were moving through the economy completely unrecognized, passing from hand to hand, register to register, year after year, and the thought that a coin worth tens of thousands of dollars might have sat in someone's change purse or been handed back as part of a routine transaction without anyone ever noticing, is a thought that haunts collectors who understand the reality of what is out there still waiting to be found. There is a particular ache that comes from hearing the stories of collectors who once held a remarkable 1967 quarter, noticed something slightly unusual about it, but set it aside or spent it because the significance did not register at the time, only to learn years later what they had let slip through their fingers, And these stories of near misses and retrospective recognition are woven deeply into the culture of this coins collector community, serving as both cautionary tales and motivational fuel for anyone who still searches through rolls and estate lots, with the quiet conviction that the next great discovery could be hiding in the very next handful of coins they examine. The minting context of 1967 also created conditions ripe for what numismatists call transitional errors, which occur when the mint is switching between compositions, planchet types, or production protocols, and a small number of coins are struck on the wrong planchet or with the wrong specifications. And for the 1967 quarter, this means that collectors must remain alert for coins struck on planchets intended for dimes, half dollars, or even foreign denominations that were being processed on the same minting equipment, because when these wrong planchet errors occur, the resulting coin carries the design of a quarter, but the weight, diameter, and metallic signature of an entirely different denomination, creating a visually arresting and numismatically priceless artifact that represents a genuine failure of the mint's quality control systems during one of the most chaotic production periods in its history. The rim of the 1967 quarter is another critical zone for examination, because the high-speed production environment led to occasional collar die failures that resulted in what collectors call broad strike errors, where the coin is struck without the restraining collar in place, allowing the metal to flow outward beyond the normal diameter, and creating a coin with an expanded, often irregular rim and design elements that stretch toward the very edge of the planchet. And these broad strike errors, when found on 1967 quarters, are among the most visually dramatic and eagerly sought production anomalies in the series, because they provide a tangible, physical record of the moment when the minting process broke down and something unexpected and unreproducible emerged from the press. When the discussion turns to value, the 1967 Washington quarter reveals a market that has been quietly building momentum for years, as collectors and specialists have come to appreciate just how rare certain configurations of this date truly are. And while the vast majority of 1967 quarters remain worth only a modest premium over their silver content value, the population of coins that display significant errors, varieties, or extraordinary preservation has established a documented market presence that spans a remarkably wide range, with notable examples having recorded collector and auction outcomes in the range of $5,000 to $7,000, a level that already reflects the extraordinary rarity of finding a 1967 quarter with both a recognized variety and strong eye appeal. And that would have been virtually unimaginable to the general public during the years when these coins were simply spending money in everyday commerce. Higher-grade errors, particularly those that combine a genuine double die or significant off-metal anomaly with a certified grade in the upper mint-state range, have achieved documented results approaching $8,000, and these prices reflect the convergence of two scarce populations, because finding a 1967 quarter with a significant error is rare. Finding one that has survived in mint-state condition is even rarer. And finding one that satisfies both criteria simultaneously is so unlikely that each verified example represents a convergence of circumstances that may never be repeated. The value progression continues its climb with strong mint-state coins that display exceptional luster, full strike characteristics, and surfaces free of the contact marks and hairlines that typically accumulate on coins exposed to any circulation. And these pristine survivors have recorded documented auction outcomes around $8,200, a figure driven by type collectors and date collectors who recognize that the 1967 quarter, despite its high mintage, is genuinely difficult to locate in the very highest grades, because the production conditions of the era favored quantity over quality, meaning that sharply struck, fully lustrous examples represent a tiny fraction of the total output. Unusual mint mistakes, including wrong planchet errors and partial collar strikes, have reached documented results near $8,700, and major error coins, particularly those involving multiple production failures such as a double die, combined with an off-center strike or a broad strike with retained elements of the collar, have achieved documented outcomes of approximately $9,000, reflecting the intense competition among error specialists who view these multi-layered anomalies as the ultimate trophies of the series. At the absolute summit of the market, exceptionally rare and fully documented error examples of the 1967 quarter have recorded collector and auction results reaching as high as $35,000, a staggering figure that places these coins in the same conversation as far older and more traditionally celebrated rarities, and that typically involves coins with extraordinary provenance, unimpeachable authentication by major grading services, and a combination of error type, grade, and visual impact that is essentially impossible to replicate, though it must always be understood that these values reflect documented transactions where applicable and are never guaranteed, and that professional authentication is absolutely essential before any sale or purchase at any level of the market. As you consider the 1967 Washington quarter, weigh it carefully on a precision scale and compare the result to the expected 5.67 grams. Examine the metal composition for any sign of an off-planchet anomaly that might reveal a wrong metal strike. Study the color for the warm undertone of 40% silver or the telltale signs of an unexpected alloy. Check the strike alignment for any rotational irregularity that might indicate a production error. Inspect the rim for evidence of expansion or broad striking that would signal a collar failure, and scrutinize every letter under magnification for the faintest shadow of doubling that could mark the coin as one of the rarest and most coveted varieties in the entire Washington quarter series. And if anything seems even slightly unusual, do not spend it, do not clean it, do not guess. Because the difference between an ordinary quarter and a life-changing discovery may come down to a fraction of a gram or a whisper of a second image that only reveals itself to the patient and the attentive. And as that possibility settles over you, consider that the next coin we examine carries a secret so deeply embedded in its design that it went unnoticed for nearly half a century before a single collector finally saw what no one else had thought to look for. Coin number 3. 1989 United States Washington Quarter, P Mint Mark, a coin that emerged from the Philadelphia Mint during a year that would prove to be one of the most historically transformative in the 20th century, carries within its small copper-nickel frame a narrative of quiet rarity that most collectors have never fully appreciated. Because 1989 was the year the Berlin Wall fell, the year communism began its collapse across Eastern Europe, the year the world reordered itself in ways that seemed almost unimaginable just months before. And yet, while history was being rewritten on the global stage, the Philadelphia Mint was quietly producing hundreds of millions of quarters that would enter circulation with no fanfare, no ceremony, and no indication that a tiny fraction of them would one day become some of the most aggressively pursued coins in the entire modern Washington quarter series. The production environment at the Philadelphia Mint in 1989 had benefited from nearly 2 decades of clad coinage experience, meaning that the technical processes had been refined, and the equipment had been upgraded to a level of consistency that earlier in the decade could only have been imagined. And yet this very refinement created a paradox, because as the Mint's quality control systems became more sophisticated and more effective at catching errors before they entered circulation, the few anomalies that did manage to slip through became exponentially rarer and exponentially more valuable to the collectors who understood what they were looking at. And the 1989 P quarter sits squarely at this intersection of improved technology and inevitable human fallibility, making it a date that rewards patient, meticulous examination in ways that most observers would never anticipate. The design of the 1989 P quarter carries John Flanagan's classic Washington portrait on the obverse with Liberty arching across the top, and "In God We Trust," positioned beneath the chin, while the reverse displays the familiar perched eagle with wings spread wide, clutching its bundle of arrows and olive branch above the denomination. And on the surface, this is a design that had been in continuous use since 1932, making it one of the most recognizable images in American numismatic art. But what distinguishes exceptional 1989P specimens from the countless millions of ordinary strikes is something far more subtle than design. It is the quality of the strike itself, the depth of the impression, the completeness of the details, and the way light interacts with the surfaces. Because even within a single production run, the variation in strike quality could be enormous depending on die age, striking pressure, planchet preparation, and a dozen other variables that most people never consider when they glance at a quarter in their change. The luster on a well-preserved 1989P quarter has a particular quality that specialists describe as almost frosty in the fields, with a slightly warmer, more satiny texture on the raised design elements. And this contrast between field and device is what collectors call contrast luster. And when a coin displays this characteristic alongside a full, sharp strike with every feather on the eagle defined, and every strand of Washington's hair individually resolved, the visual impact is striking enough that experienced graders can often identify these premium examples from across a room without magnification, simply by the way the coin catches and plays with light in a manner that ordinary circulation strikes never achieve. The minting context of 1989 also holds a detail that few collectors pause to consider, because this was the 50th anniversary year of the Washington Quarter series, which had begun in 1932 as a commemorative issue marking the bicentennial of George Washington's birth. And while the Mint did not officially acknowledge this anniversary with any special design modification or commemorative release, the fact that the 1989 production run represented a half-century of continuous Washington Quarter production adds a layer of historical resonance that thoughtful collectors find deeply appealing. Because every 1989P quarter is in a sense a quiet milestone, a coin struck exactly 50 years after the first Washington quarters entered circulation during the depths of the Great Depression. And that temporal bridge between one of America's darkest economic moments and the confident, booming economy of the late 1980s gives the coin a narrative richness that transcends its technical specifications. Among the known errors and varieties for the 1989P quarter, one of the most intriguing categories involves what numismatists refer to as retained cud errors, where a portion of the die face breaks away during production, but the broken fragment remains partially in place, creating a coin that displays a raised, blob-like area of unstruck metal near the rim, while the rest of the design remains normally impressed. And these retained cud errors on 1989P quarters are particularly prized because they represent a specific moment of mechanical failure captured in metal, a frozen record of the instant when a die began to disintegrate under the relentless pressure of mass production. And each one is unique because no two die breaks occur in exactly the same pattern or location. The emotional core of the 1989P quarters collector story revolves around the concept of the overlooked treasure, because this is a coin that was produced in such enormous quantities and entered circulation so widely that virtually every American alive during the late 1980s and 1990s probably handled one without a second thought. And the idea that a coin you might have used to buy a newspaper or feed a parking meter could actually be worth more than a used car is a notion that sits at the very heart of what makes modern era coin collecting so endlessly compelling and so quietly devastating to those who realize only in hindsight what they may have let pass through their fingers. There's a particular kind of regret that collectors describe when they recall examining a 1989P quarter years ago, noticing something slightly off about the lettering or the rim, but not understanding the significance, and then spending the coin or returning it to a drawer, only to discover much later that what they had been holding was a genuine doubled die, or a significant off-center strike, that would have been worth thousands of dollars to the right buyer. And these stories of retrospective recognition circulate through the collector community like shared wounds, binding enthusiasts together through the common understanding that in numismatics, as in life, the most consequential moments are often the ones that go unrecognized until long after they have passed. The weight and composition of a standard 1989 P quarter should register at approximately 5.67 grams with a clad composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel, bonded over a pure copper core, giving the coin its characteristic pale silver appearance. And collectors are strongly encouraged to weigh any suspicious example on a digital scale calibrated to at least 1/100th of a gram, because even a slight deviation from the expected weight can signal that the coin was struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination. And these wrong planchet errors are among the most dramatic and visually arresting anomalies associated with the 1989 P quarter, because when a quarter design is struck on a dime planchet, the result is a coin that appears undersized with design elements running off the edges, and when struck on a $half planchet, the design floats in the center of an oversized disc with vast unstruck margins. And each configuration tells a specific story about what went wrong on the production line, and how the quality control systems failed to catch it before the coin escaped into circulation. The rim of the 1989 P quarter also demands careful inspection, because the collar die that shapes the edge and restrains the planchet during striking occasionally malfunctioned in ways that produced what specialists call partial collar, or ejected collar errors, where portions of the rim display the normal reeded edge while other portions show smooth, unstruck metal. And these transitional rim errors are especially valued because they document the exact moment when the collar mechanism began to fail, capturing in metal a mechanical narrative that can never be reproduced or duplicated. When the conversation shifts toward market value, the 1989 P Washington quarter reveals a landscape that has been quietly expanding as more collectors and specialists have come to recognize the genuine rarity of certain configurations. And while the overwhelming majority of these coins remain worth exactly 25 cents, the small population that displays significant errors, varieties, or extraordinary preservation has established a documented market presence that has grown steadily more robust over the past decade, with smaller errors and modestly notable varieties having recorded collector and auction outcomes in the range of $3,000 to $6,000. Figures that already represent returns of more than 10,000 times the coin's face value, and that reflect the growing sophistication of the modern error coin market, where collectors are willing to pay significant sums for genuinely rare production anomalies that would have been overlooked or dismissed entirely just a generation ago. Unusual discoveries, including newly attributed varieties and previously undocumented error types, have achieved documented results approaching $6,500, and these prices often reflect the excitement that accompanies a genuine new find, because the community of error and variety collectors thrives on discovery, and each new attribution adds another chapter to the ongoing story of what the mint produced and what managed to escape detection. And the 1989 P quarter has proven to be a particularly fertile date for these emerging discoveries, as more collectors train themselves to recognize subtle anomalies that earlier generations simply did not have the tools or knowledge to identify. Premium high-grade examples of the 1989 P quarter, certified by major grading services at the very top of the numerical scale with full strike characteristics, unbroken luster, and pristine surfaces, have recorded documented auction outcomes near $7,000, and these prices are driven by the reality that while the 1989 P quarter was produced in enormous quantities, finding one that has survived in truly flawless condition is extraordinarily difficult because the vast majority entered circulation immediately and began accumulating the contact marks, hairlines, and environmental damage that disqualify them from the highest grades. Significant error coins, particularly those involving wrong planchet strikes or retained cut errors, have reached documented results of approximately $8,000, and exceptional mint-state errors that combine a genuine production anomaly with a certified high grade have achieved outcomes around $8,600, representing the convergence of two already scarce populations that becomes vanishingly rare when both criteria must be satisfied simultaneously. Rare misstrikes, including off-center errors and multiple strike coins, where the planchet was struck more than once with each impression offset from the others, have recorded documented results approaching $9,000. And at the very apex of the market, extraordinary and fully documented examples of the 1989 P quarter with exceptional provenance, unimpeachable authentication, and a combination of error type and grade that is essentially impossible to replicate, have achieved collector and auction results reaching as high as $11,000, a figure that would have seemed inconceivable for a modern clad quarter when these coins were first released, though it must always be emphasized that these values represent documented auction or collector sales where applicable and are never guaranteed, and that professional authentication by recognized grading services is absolutely essential before any transaction at any level of this market. As you take a 1989 P quarter and hold it under bright, even lighting, begin by weighing it precisely and comparing the result to the expected 5.67 grams, because even a minuscule deviation could signal a wrong planchet error that transforms an ordinary quarter into something extraordinary. Then examine the metal composition and color for any sign of an off-metal anomaly that might indicate the coin was struck on a planchet prepared for an entirely different denomination. Study the strike quality for the sharp, complete impression that distinguishes premium examples from the millions of ordinary strikes. Run your fingertips slowly along the rim, feeling for any irregularity in the reading or any evidence of collar failure that would mark the coin as a significant production error. And finally, scrutinize every letter on both sides of the coin under magnification, searching for the faintest trace of a secondary image that could identify the coin as one of the rarest and most coveted double die varieties in the entire Washington quarter series. And if anything seems even slightly unusual, set the coin aside and seek professional authentication before making any decision about selling or buying, because the stakes in this market are far too high for guesswork. And as you reflect on the extraordinary story hidden inside this seemingly ordinary coin, consider that the next piece we examine carries a mystery so profound that it remained completely unrecognized for over 30 years, until a single sharp-eyed collector noticed something that every other person who had ever held the coin had missed entirely. Last coin. United States 1978 Washington quarter, a coin so deeply embedded in the fabric of late 20th century American life that it passed through millions of hands without ever drawing the slightest attention, was struck during a period when the nation was grappling with inflation, energy crises, and a profound sense of economic uncertainty that colored every aspect of daily commerce. And yet beneath the surface of this utterly unremarkable-looking coin lies a collector's story so unexpected that even seasoned numismatists have been caught off guard by what has emerged from the most unlikely places over the past several decades. The year 1978 was the final full year before the Susan B. Anthony dollar's introduction would disrupt production schedules at the Mint, and facilities in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco were operating under intense pressure to maintain adequate coinage supply for a growing economy, with quarters being produced at a pace that left operators stretched thin and quality control systems tested to their limits, creating conditions where small but significant production anomalies could and did slip through the cracks, entering the money supply alongside hundreds of millions of perfectly normal coins, and dispersing so widely that their very existence went unrecognized for years, sometimes decades, until the right collector happened to pull the right coin from the right roll at exactly the right moment. The visual character of the 1978 Washington quarter follows the long-standing Flanagan design that had been in use since 1932, with Washington's stern left-facing profile on the obverse beneath Liberty and beside In God We Trust, and the perched eagle on the reverse clutching its arrow, an olive branch above the $quarter denomination. But what separates an ordinary 1978 quarter from one that commands collector attention is a combination of strike sharpness, surface preservation, and luster quality that most people would never think to evaluate on a coin they associate with laundromats and arcade machines. Because the standard clad composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel over a pure copper core produces a pale, almost flat silver tone that does not naturally draw the eye. And yet when a 1978 quarter survives in exceptional condition with full, blazing mint luster, and a strike so sharp that every feather on the eagle's wing appears individually carved, the coin takes on an almost luminous quality that transforms it from a piece of pocket change into something that looks genuinely special even to someone who has never studied numismatics in any formal way. The color of a well-preserved 1978 quarter can also reveal important diagnostic information, because while the standard clad alloy should present a consistent pale silver across all surfaces, certain error coins struck on wrong planchets or with contaminated alloy batches display tunning patterns or base metal hues that immediately signal something out of the ordinary. And these color variations, when combined with weight discrepancies, can point towards some of the most dramatic and valuable error types known to exist on this date. The minting environment of 1978 carried a particular set of technical challenges that distinguish it from both earlier and later production years, because the clad coinage system that had been in place since 1965 was by this point mature, but not yet refined to the level it would reach in subsequent decades. And the dies used at all three minting facilities were subject to wear patterns and failure modes that produced a distinctive range of error types, including what specialists call die crack progression errors, where a crack in the die face gradually worsens over the course of a production run, creating a visible raised line on successive coins that grows and branches like a river delta as the crack deepens. And when collectors find a sequence of 1978 quarters showing progressive die crack development from the same die pair, they can reconstruct a visual timeline of the die's deterioration that is both scientifically fascinating and commercially valuable, because advanced die-state coins with major cracks or retained die breaks are among the most sought-after varieties in the entire Washington quarter series. Another particularly compelling category of 1978 quarter errors involves what numismatists classify as struck-through anomalies, where a foreign object such as a wire, a shard of metal, a piece of cloth, or even a grease deposit from the minting machinery becomes lodged between the die and the planchet during the strike, leaving an impression of the intrusive object on the coin's surface. And these struck-through errors are inherently unpredictable and unrepeatable, meaning that each one is a unique artifact of a specific moment in the production process. And when they occur on 1978 quarters in combination with strong eye appeal and high preservation grades, they generate collector interest that far exceeds what most people would ever associate with a coin from this era. The emotional landscape of 1978 quarter collecting is defined by a recurring theme of overlooked opportunity, because this is a coin that was produced in such volume and circulated so broadly that virtually every American who lived through that period handled them constantly. And the notion that a quarter used to buy a pack of gum or dropped into a toll booth could have been worth more than a month's rent is a realization that has struck many collectors with a force that borders on grief when they begin to understand what may have passed through their hands unrecognized. There's a story that circulates among error coin enthusiasts about a collector who once received a 1978 quarter in change at a convenience store, noticed that the lettering seemed slightly thick or unusual, but was in a hurry and simply dropped the coin into a cup holder without further examination. And it was only months later, after the cup was cleaned out and the coin rediscovered during a casual sorting session, that the collector looked more carefully and realized they had been carrying a genuine double die variety worth several $1,000s. And stories like this serve as both inspiration and warning to anyone who handles older coins, because the line between an ordinary quarter and an extraordinary discovery is often thinner than anyone imagines, and the consequences of inattention can be measured in real, tangible financial terms that linger in the memory long after the moment itself has faded. The practical examination of any 1978 quarter suspected of carrying collector significance should begin with a precise weight measurement on a digital scale calibrated to at least the 100th of a gram, because the expected weight of 5.67 grams serves as a baseline against which any deviation becomes immediately meaningful. And a coin that weighs significantly less may have been struck on a dime planchet, while one that weighs more could indicate a $half planchet or even a foreign planchet that somehow entered the production stream. And these wrong planchet errors are among the most visually dramatic and commercially significant discoveries associated with this date, because they represent a complete breakdown of the mint's material handling systems. The strike alignment should be checked by holding the coin obverse side up, and then flipping it top to bottom to verify that the reverse appears upside down in the standard coin turn orientation, because any deviation from this alignment could indicate a rare rotational error where the dies were not properly indexed relative to each other. And these rotated die errors, while subtle enough to be missed by casual observation, are immediately recognizable to trained eyes and add a layer of collectible significance that can substantially elevate a coin's market position. The rim must be inspected under magnification for any evidence of splitting, folding, or irregular expansion that would indicate a collar die malfunction, and every letter on both the obverse and reverse should be examined with a loupe or microscope for the faintest trace of a secondary offset image that would identify the coin as a genuine double die rather than a common example of mechanical doubling, which does not carry the same collector value or significance. When attention turns to the question of value, the 1978 Washington quarter reveals a market that has been developing with increasing sophistication as collectors have come to appreciate the genuine rarity of certain error and variety configurations on this specific date. And while the vast majority of 1978 quarters remain worth only their face value, the documented market for exceptional examples has grown steadily over the past 15 years. With minor errors and modest variety attributions having recorded collector and auction outcomes in the range of $900 to $2,000, a level that already represents a return of thousands of times the coin's original denomination. And that reflects the growing recognition among specialists that the 1978 date harbors more significant varieties than was previously understood. Unusual misstrikes, including off-center strikes and coins showing evidence of multiple strikes from the same or different dies, have achieved documented results approaching $3,000. And these prices reflect not only the raw rarity of such errors, but also the visual drama they present. Because an off-center 1978 quarter with a significant portion of the design missing and a large blank area of unstruck planchet visible is an object that immediately commands attention and tells a story of mechanical failure that anyone can understand and appreciate, even without deep numismatic knowledge. Premium high-grade examples certified at the very top of the mint state scale have recorded documented auction outcomes near $3,500, driven by the difficulty of finding any 1978 quarter that has survived without the contact marks and surface degradation that accumulates so quickly on coins that enter circulation. And strong mint-state error coins that combine a genuine production anomaly with a high certified grade have reached documented results of approximately $5,000, representing the convergence of two already scarce populations that becomes extraordinarily rare when both conditions must be met simultaneously. Rare misstrikes involving complex error mechanisms such as double strikes with rotation between impressions or strikes on already struck coins have achieved documented outcomes around $6,000, and extraordinary collector examples that combine multiple desirable attributes including exceptional grade, significant error type, and strong visual appeal have recorded results reaching $6,500. Figures that underscore the degree to which the market for modern error and variety coinage has matured into a serious area of numismatic investment. At the absolute peak of the market, exceptional or one-of-a-kind documented discoveries on the 1978 quarter have achieved collector and auction results as high as $9,000, a figure that would have been considered impossible for a clad Washington quarter just a generation ago. And that typically involves coins with extraordinary provenance, unimpeachable authentication by major grading services, and a combination of characteristics so rare that no comparable example may ever surface again, though it must always be clearly stated that these values represent documented auction or private sale results, where applicable and are never guaranteed, and that professional authentication is absolutely essential before any purchase or sale at any level of this market. As you consider everything you have learned about the 1978 Washington quarter, take a moment to reflect on the extraordinary idea that a coin this common, this overlooked, this deeply woven into the ordinary fabric of American daily life, could still harbor secrets worth thousands of dollars to the person patient enough to look closely and careful enough to recognize what they are seeing. And if you have any quarters from this era sitting in a jar, a drawer, or an old coin collection inherited from a family member, now is the time to weigh them, examine their color, check their strike alignment, inspect their rims, and study their lettering under magnification. Because the next great discovery in the Washington Quarter series could be sitting in your own home right now, waiting in silence for someone to finally see what has been there all along. And if you found this journey fascinating, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next remarkable coin we uncover. Because valuable treasures are still hiding in everyday pocket change, and the next one we examine might just be the most extraordinary of all. And with that, this video comes to a close, so thank you for watching, and until next time, keep searching.